What happens when the people who claim to control everything suddenly realize they don't? Imagine a neighborhood built on quiet routines, perfectly edged lawns, identical fences, rule books thicker than most people have ever read. At the center of it all sits an HOA board convinced it is the final authority. They issue notices, impose fines, and make decisions behind closed doors, believing compliance equals respect. But control built on fear is never permanent, and when it starts to slip, the fall is slow, uncomfortable, and impossible to stop. It often begins with a single decision that feels insignificant to the board: a violation notice for a harmless change, a fine that seems excessive, a denial that makes no sense. The board sees it as enforcement, the homeowner sees it as injustice. That gap in perception is where everything starts to unravel. Conversations begin in driveways and group chats. People compare experiences and realize they're not alone. What once felt like isolated incidents now look like a pattern of control. As enforcement increases, patience decreases. Homeowners attend meetings for the first time, only to be talked over or ignored. Questions are labeled as disruptive. Requests for documents are delayed or denied. The board insists it is acting in the community's best interest, but the community is no longer convinced. The atmosphere shifts from cooperation to suspicion. Trust, once broken, is difficult to repair. This is the moment residents start educating themselves. They read the bylaws, they study state laws, they learn the difference between what the HOA claims it can do and what it is legally allowed to do. And that knowledge changes everything. The fear that kept people quiet begins to fade. Fines are questioned, letters are challenged. The board's authority is no longer taken at face value. When homeowners push back, the HOA often responds with escalation, more warnings, larger penalties, legal threats meant to intimidate rather than resolve. But each aggressive step only exposes how unstable the situation has become. Instead of restoring order, the board creates opposition. Neighbors who barely spoke before now unite around a common goal: accountability. Then the outside world enters the picture. Attorneys review documents, city officials inspect properties, regulators examine records. Suddenly, the HOA is no longer the highest power in the room. The rules they enforced so confidently are measured against real laws, and in many cases they don't hold up. That's when control truly starts to slip. Internally, the board begins to fracture. Disagreements surface. Long-serving members resign quietly. New volunteers hesitate to step in. Meetings become tense and emotional. Financial decisions are questioned. Budgets, once approved without discussion, are now dissected line by line. Every past action is re-examined, and mistakes that were once hidden are brought into the open. For the community, the impact is emotional as much as legal. Longtime neighbors feel betrayed. Property values become a concern. The sense of unity the HOA was meant to protect feels more fragile than ever. And the irony is impossible to ignore. The organization created to maintain harmony has become the source of conflict. In some neighborhoods, this moment leads to transformation. New leadership takes over. Rules are rewritten with clarity and fairness. Transparency replaces secrecy. The HOA survives, but in a weaker, more balanced form, one that understands its limits. In other cases, the damage runs too deep. Lawsuits drain funds, insurance premiums rise. The board loses credibility entirely, becoming little more than a name on paper. So what happens when the HOA loses control? It's not sudden chaos, it's a slow shift in power. Fear gives way to confidence. Silence turns into questions, and authority that once felt absolute is revealed to be conditional. Because in the end, an HOA only has as much control as the homeowners allow. Once that realization spreads, control doesn't need to be taken away, it simply dissolves.